All right, joining me right now to talk further about what we just heard, former federal prosecutors Renato Mariotti and Shan Wu. Good to see you both. So, the legal definition of obstruction of justice is, here it is, willfully interfering with the process of justice and law, especially by influencing, threatening, harming, or impeding a witness. So Shan, Rudy Giuliani says that Michael Cohen may have discussed what he was going to say with the president, but says the president, didn't tell him to lie, and he goes back and forth on whether he's certain whether that conversation would have happened or not. But if it were to happen, would that be obstruction?
That depends on what was said. What's particularly ridiculous about what Giuliani is saying, and obviously this is not lawyering, I'm sure Renato will agree, this is PR strategy. I mean, for him to say that it's absolutely normal for him to have spoken to Cohen is just completely crazy. I mean, the last thing you would ever tell your client to do is to go ahead and speak to that guy who's going to be testifying in Congress, speak to that guy who's under investigation where they raided his office. That would violate rules 1 through 20 of criminal defense because it's so obvious that the investigators would be looking at you. So it really depends on what he said, but this spin that is perfectly fine, is perfectly normal for him to be talking to him, is nothing more than spin.
And to Renato, it's unusual or strange to have such discussions, particularly because President Trump is, individual A. He's a subject. He is involved in the investigation in which Michael Cohen would be asked about, and that's what would make it inappropriate.
That's right. Well, also, he knew that Michael Cohen was himself under investigation and was a witness in matters involving him. So when I represent clients who are under investigation, I routinely tell them not to speak to people who are potential witnesses against them, not to speak to other people who are a part of that same investigation, for exactly this reason. You have to expect that if there are conversations between people who are subject to the investigation before there's testimony, of course the prosecutor is going to look to see whether there was obstruction. Now, Shan is completely correct that what matters there is the context of the conversation, but essentially what's happened is that by having these conversations, if Giuliani is correct in what he said, that he's opened himself up, Trump has, to more investigation and more prosecutors looking at exactly what he told Michael Cohen and when.
And Shan, Giuliani also admitted, in this interview that Michael Cohen and Donald Trump had discussions about the Moscow Trump Tower project, but said that Michael Cohen was running things, and even though there were discussions in 2015 and a good part of 2016. So his defense is that the president probably didn't remember the details of those conversations. He also says it's not a deal until it's finalized. It's just a plan, not really a project. Is that right?
Well, the fact that they're now admitting that there were conversations well into 2016 is in and of itself quite the bombshell, because that's something they really tried to stay away from before. And the whole notion that it's okay for him to be talking about that so close to the time where he's actually going to be president is really sort of a preposterous situation. So that in and of itself, I think, is something that Giuliani is really trying to mask here. And it's important for us not to lose sight of that in what they're talking about.
So Renato, Roger Stone, Associate Jerome Corsi may be called to testify in front of a Senate hearing, and he says he has turned down a deal with the special counsel. Rudy Giuliani says he knows all about the deal and discussions between Corsi and the prosecutors because he processes leaked documents in the case. So about that issue of why it's okay, Rudy Giuliani, to receive these leaked documents, but there's great criticism if anyone else receives any leaked documents and uses it to their advantage.
Yeah, I've got to say, if what you're suggesting is that Giuliani is being hypocritical, that really doesn't surprise me at all. He is very much throughout this investigation appears to be winging it as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Corsi is somebody who is perhaps the only person involved in this investigation acting more bizarrely than Mr. Giuliani. Corsi is tweeting out attacks on Mueller and it's articulating various conspiracy theories regarding Mueller. And in fact, if what Mr. Corsi himself says is correct, he is under criminal investigation Mueller's preparing to indict him, so the last thing he should be doing is testifying or giving documents to anyone or having any conversations about this. He should hire a competent attorney who I have questions about the attorney he's hired now, and he should remain silent. And frankly, Giuliani is not doing his client any favors. He might be better off exercising his right to remain silent as well.
And Shan, as of now, Michael Cohen is scheduled to testify February 7th, before a House committee. But apparently and reportedly he is, rethinking that. What are the potential ramifications if he decides not to accept that offer, or at least, remove himself from his initial, offer that he would do it? What's at stake?
He needs to think very carefully about that. There's already been talk that the special counsel is going to limit what he can testify to. So he needs to be very careful about appearing in public. And again, testifying under oath. Anytime you're under oath, you're exposing yourself again to potential false statements or perjury situations. Everyone has to be careful here, because if we look at the historical lesson of Iran-Contra, you don't want him testifying to something in Congress that he's been essentially given a pass on in the criminal investigation. Creates all sorts of issues. One last thing, Frederica, to Renato's point of the hypocrisy of Giuliani, or kind of talking out both sides of his mouth, you notice how often he emphasizes that Cohen would be the guy who knows everything. Trump's way too busy. But at the same time, he picks and chooses when you want to listen to Cohen. If Cohen's the guy that is the go-to guy who knows everything, we should be listening to Cohen.
All right, Shan Wu, Renato Mariotti, thank you so much. A lot of mental gymnastics going on here. All right.